It's so much easier for me in the morning if I just sneak out and she doesn't see me and she won't cry and she won't make a scene. Say that 3 times slow. It's so much easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to move away from what is comfortable and easy and accessible and simple for us as parents and towards what is best for them today, tomorrow, and 10 years from now.
Yeah, amen to that.
The following is not meant to serve as medical advice. It's merely the story of my own journey and learning process. All the Unexpected, Season 2, Episode 7. What Young Children Need You to Know, Part 2. Welcome back. Been quite the break. So, Part 1 of this discussion of, I would call it a modern parenting tome of wisdom by the dear Bridget Miller, who actually I sent the previous episode to and got in touch and really enjoyed our discussion. And that was just really nice to hear that, I wasn't just sending things out into the ether, but here we were being listened to. Wrote this book, and we sort of got halfway through my reading of it the last time. And I, at the time, promised a season 2, or not a season 2, a part 2 rather, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, X amount of months later. We'll see how many months later it is. And I am joined once again in the second part of this episode by my producer, co-parent, husband, and partner, Joshua Reyes.
Hello. So great again. And thank you to Bridget for reaching out to us. We like suspense.
We do. We also like driving across the country twice with a 2-year-old.
Yeah, that's more of the reason, I think.
So life got in the way. Well, but to be fair, if one would like to put gentle parenting into work, spend a total of 15 days?
Yeah, drive 4,000 miles with a 2-year-old strapped to the back of your car.
Well, strapped in the inside of the back.
Sure.
Minor details. But yeah, it was definitely an exercise in the application of principles in many ways, and patience and, understanding of what that small mind is really doing.
Yeah, and you really do get the results. Like, she was actually quite great along the way because of the gentle corrections and the different things that we utilized that we even read in the book. She was great. It was, you really get the results out of it.
Yeah, and just understanding, hey, these are your limits. This is what you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to expect too much more than you're capable of. And somewhere in that understanding, I think, is found a moment of peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like peace with the frustration we tend to feel with children, right? And peace with them in that I would give them the agency to say that they're actually really being heard, right?
Yeah. It's this whole, obviously treat them as a child in terms of like respecting their level of aptitude, like when it comes to certain things, but then also treat them like an adult in the way you talk to them and, let them reason for themselves. That definitely shows a lot of get a good reaction from that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to me because I think it also is always framed in expectations, right? So we expect things from children that we would never expect from adults. And when we do that, there's a sort of an imbalance, and it makes no sense, right? So would you tell an adult, and even when I think about, teaching school, would you tell an adult, you're only allowed to go to the bathroom once a day, and you're making an excuse to get out of this room just to have to go again, right? Like, no, but we tell this to children, right? Would you write their name on the wall at work and say, oh, another check because you didn't do something I liked today, or you made a bad face, or you, were cranky on Monday morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that we tend to not really treat them like adults, but hold them to relatively higher standards than we
Yeah.
would most adults, right?
Yeah.
Which is counterintuitive to say the least. Like counterproductive, counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. It's kind of built into society, though. It's like the idea of a subservient child to your will and your wishes, and not looking at them as adult or an equal.
Yeah, well, so was slavery and women not voting. So we let's maybe make space for change, right?
Yes.
To be fair. So um that being said, I was looking through the book again, and one of the later chapters that we hadn't got to the last time really stuck out with me because it's something that I'm encountering more and more as I'm home with our newly 3-year-old daughter. So
Yay.
yeah, we survived twos.
They weren't so terrible. She was wonderful.
Yeah, they really weren't. Like, depends on, I guess, your definition of terror. But also, no, I think we survived. I don't say we survived, we thrived. And we, had this wonderful milestone. And now we've got a 3-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have a 3-year-old that's as big as a 4-year-old, but still emotionally a little bit of a 2-year-old.
Yeah, so every preemie parent out there felt that one. It's like,
Yeah.
my kid that's a 6 to 12 month size on top and like a 2T on the bottom in the land of preemies. But yeah, and so one of the chapters that I really like is entitled "When I Help You, I Feel Important," and I think in our list making, stress induced, on the go, busy world, most people are just like, I don't have time to make an everyday task take longer, right? We need to get in the car seat. We need to go to the place. We need to get this done. And in that haste and efficiency, I think sometimes we can unconsciously lose these moments of connection. Right. And so just want to read the quote that she has in this chapter that really stuck out to me. And she says, "We think it will be quicker and easier to just do it ourselves. And we'd probably be correct. But by excluding our young children, we miss out on opportunities to convey to them the important message that their presence and contributions are valued by us."
Yeah. That's kind of what we were talking about with the whole treating them like an adult thing, but not necessarily expecting what you would expect from an adult. I find that very helpful actually with helping, like we said, she's a preemie, helping, like trying to get her to like, I find myself expecting more, emotionally and kind of pull myself back to remember that she's a little bit behind because she was born so early. And I guess that goes overall throughout childhood, and any kid of any age, you gotta kind of forget that. Like you said about expecting, like you wouldn't have gold stars and putting your name on the board for doing bad things, vice on the opposite end for adults. So like for children, we shouldn't do that, but at the same time, it's a balance between letting them reason and find the reason themselves, like you would talk to an adult, but not necessarily treat them like an adult. I don't know. It's hard to explain. Maybe that's what the book would probably help me with. So.
Well, no, and so I think part of what is being said here is, right, that there's always space to take a step back, right? To say, okay, yes, I could do this so much quicker. So when you spill water on the floor, and I could just grab a paper towel and do it myself and have it be over, but I watch you standing there wanting to help me, I take the extra time and I give you the paper towel, and yes, you may not actually finish the job and I still have to go back and do it. But in that moment, I've given you agency as a member of the household, right? And I've incorporated you into having some place in its upkeep and having some agency in just your own space, right? And that's, I think, really important. And so I really like that she kind of says later in the chapter, says, by appreciating their interest and willingness to assist us, we'll be led to notice and perhaps even reclaim some of the joy found in the everyday and mundane.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's these small moments of being able to cook things together or mix things together. We've gotten to the point where we're not still eating all the ingredients, right? That we can stir and mix. And I see, so much, so many small moments of joy just in something as simple as making dinner.
Watering the plants, getting her to respect, not trying to pick on all the leaves and the flowers. If she waters them and cares for them, then she has a little bit more agency over the upkeep of them and keeping them nice. And then it's a different kind of conversation than just, no, don't touch that,
Yeah, I always use the example of the time I spent living in Japan and how once a month the whole school would go and the kids would put on these white smocks and take their scrub brushes and they cleaned that school top to bottom.
Whoa, isn't that child labor?
Well, laws are still a little different there, but nonetheless, right? There was a certain respect for that building. I didn't find gum under those desks, right? I didn't find, the same scrawling on the wall and those sort of things because there was something in your mind that I made it look this good. I took part in this and I have a responsibility to upkeep it.
Now, how young are these kids? How young will that be impactful for them?
I feel like I've seen it even in preschool.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen it, the early stages of it, not as intense as by the time they're in junior high school, like they're legitimately doing that work,
So do they have like custodians or any sort of janitors on duty, or is it just all the kids? I'm kidding. That's rhetorical. You don't have to answer that.
But if I think about it, I don't know if I've ever seen one. Right? So, but if I've
Wow,
erased,
so efficient. It's so efficient.
but yeah. So nonetheless, right? There's stages and moments in just understanding that little bit of agency can also be doled out. No one's saying have the 3-year-old make the whole meal, right? No one's saying clean the whole house, but we're saying like, guess what? If this little part in this little space is yours, you're able to be part of the family life and you're also more likely to respect that space and that thing and those plans.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even the way we got her table manners together at such an early age. She's been given a seat at the table with utensils and treated, like we would treat anybody else. And now she's 3 years old, we take her out in public. And even at 2, people were just amazed at how well she behaves herself and handles the eating, because we weren't feeding her and trying to like force feed her or doing things for her. We gave her agency over it. Now she takes pride in doing it the way we originally desired. Well, I guess we all desire our kids to eat in a neat way and yeah.
No, and that's part of it too. And I think that's a perfect segue into the next piece. And so the next chapter is called I'm Just Doing It for Attention. And that's a thing I think a lot of parents misinterpret, right? That I threw this thing across the room because I want you to pay attention to me and I'm acting out, right? And the idea of having the malintent and manipulation behind it is cognitively impossible. They don't have that many sort of complex planning thoughts in their minds. And so there's a great quote here, right? It says, as babies grow into toddlers and then into young children, they become more verbal and independent. Although they are capable of doing many more things for themselves, their need to feel taken care of remains just as strong. Given that all young children have an innate drive to be taken care of, they need to feel noticed in order to feel connected. And so they are instinctively driven to attract attention to themselves.
So you're telling me that she's not plotting against me and doing that thing to get that reaction? She knows what she's doing. She knows what she's doing. Come on.
Emotional capability and the adult capability of manipulation doesn't have a place, right? This is what the child's completely incapable of doing, but also just innately seeking that connection, because in that connection is safety. And that's such a huge piece to remember. So it's really hard to kind of tell yourself, she threw that toy at my head because she needs to feel safe.
No, she just threw that toy in my head because she knows that I'm going to react to her and pay attention to her.
But in that reaction, she finds safety.
Yeah.
And that understanding of it allows us to regulate our emotions as parents, right? That understanding of it gives us that ability and that peace to say, okay, yes, my temple hurts because now, I've had a small truck thrown at me,
Mm-hmm.
but my child's not doing it out of harm, out of malintent, out of anything that, is coming from a bad place, except for the need for connection, right? The need to know that I'm still there. I will be there. I'm not going anywhere, and they are taken care of.
Yeah. That thinking is what helps keep my emotions in check. Like every time, like especially when you're reacting to something that's painful, for example, the truck hitting your head is some sort of like obviously loud reaction, swift reaction. But when you remember this, how everything you just said, it helps keep the emotions in check. And then the situation resolves itself a lot quicker. And there's no long term, like, like a kid would develop. I would develop like if a grandmother or my mother would like start to reach down. I think they were going for their chancla, and like those kind of things are ingrained in you as a young child. Even though trying to go to scratch her knee, you think she's going to go pick up her chancla, being obviously the Spanish version of a flip flop. Yeah. Anybody who's grew up with a Spanish parents or grandparents right now know exactly what I'm talking about. My grandmother used to be able to throw hers around the corner like a boomerang. You couldn't even get away if you went to the other room. But nonetheless, they don't develop those kinds of like what honestly traumatic type of reactions built into their psyche because you're better regulated. They become better regulated.
Well, that's the thing. So not only are you modeling behavior and you're modeling, response, you're modeling how emotional regulation works. And I think here's where do as I say, not as I do, right? Has no place because they will do as you do. They will understand that this is the response to stress. This is the response to anger. And I thought a really great point that she makes at the end of this chapter, right, is withholding attention from a child who's acting out to get it will never resolve what's driving them to act out.
Mm-hmm.
And so this ignore the tantrum, school of parenting is missing the point, right?
Yeah, and that's one that's quite popular amongst people who do conscious parenting. It's like, yeah, if you ignore them or if you don't react to them, then you're probably just doing just as much damage in a different way, though. It's interesting because that's definitely like a big conscious parenting. The people who are on the opposite end of hitting or yelling, hitting your kids or yelling at your kids, they'll be more about like timeouts, ignoring, and stuff like that, which doesn't seem to be. It seems to be effective in some ways, but could cause long-term damage in other ways that you're not even realizing.
Well, there's the thing. A well-behaved child is not necessarily a well-adjusted child. And that is a very big thing that people talk about. So, the child that was quiet and never talked out in class and, followed the rules, knew better than to act out for whatever reason, maybe the same kid that at 15 has anxiety and an obsession with perfectionism and all these things that can come on the opposite end of it. So it's really about understanding that instruction of emotional regulation through example. And I think that's a big piece of it, which I think is a really interesting sort of segue into the next thing that she says. And I love the title of this chapter, and it's "You Can't Make Me Feel Sorry." This is a great one because we teach that to kids, right? We teach them please and thank you and I'm sorry. And we really think that just sort of saying the phrase is what we need from them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just...
What if they say it and just saying it because they know that's what you want to hear and not because they understand what it's supposed to be for?
Okay, well, here's the example, right? So a child breaks something. and you see that crestfallen expression in their face
Mhm.
because they do have guilt. They do immediately feel bad. Two things to keep in mind. The first of which I think is a very important point. It says their currently non-integrated brain isn't capable of focusing on what they are doing and predicting potential consequences of their action at the same time.
Hmm.
Yeah. So every time you say you keep doing that, you're gonna break it. They're not weighing that consequence. Your imposition of trying to get them to understand that consequence has no effect in their literal cognitive ability.
Yeah. It's the whole results of your actions thing is not quite connected. And there's no point in getting angry at them for not understanding that. Yeah, that would help a lot of conflict if parents understood that.
Yeah, you're like, how many times did I
Yeah.
tell you it was gonna break? Okay, great. But at how many times did you tell me did I not register that as being a thing? Because I literally can't.
Mhm.
And so that when we transfer to, oh, they broke their friend's toy doing that, right? Not even their own thing. Then we're saying, okay, well, now you have to tell Sally sorry, right?
Yeah.
And we want them to be able to actually express that contrition, right? And feel bad for Sally. But guess what? Later in the chapter, she tells us this. Keep in mind that young children are not yet developmentally capable of feeling bad for another at the very same time they are feeling bad for themselves.
Yeah. So take away the shame part of it and then they can understand the other part. But it's more than even, I mean, you definitely want to teach your child to have empathy and, respect people's things. But it's more like, what are you trying to teach them in each situation? Like what is a way to correct behavior without doing it that way?
Well, she goes on to say that. She goes, demanding the apology may extract the I'm sorry, but the words are hollow.
Yeah.
So what we can do, right, she's saying, is we model our apologies and we model that actions from our apologies are corrected, right? So that if we say sorry for something, it means that we don't intend to do it again. And that modeling over time, as with all other modeling, takes root and takes hold. So that by the time that they are emotionally, cognitively, psychologically, and even physiologically ready to express all of the steps of feeling contrition, expressing it, repairing a relationship, all of those things, they've got a model and a basis that is a healthy example for it. That's what we can do. Right?
Okay.
I always love the chapter's ends with the here's what you can do, right? And she says, remember that making them regret their actions by shaming them is very different from inviting them to feel safe enough to access the vulnerability required to feel remorse for their actions.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, these little helpful ends of the chapters are great because they do sum it up. But yeah, the idea that you are modeling that true contrition, true remorse for something involves a vulnerability. It involves saying, I was wrong in that moment, and I intend to show the attempt to repair that wrong by changing my actions in the future.
So would you say that children are already capable or born with that empathy and they unlearn it? Or is that something that parents are trying to instill or teach kids to have?
I mean, empathy is a very particular thing because empathy implies I understand how you feel because that thing has happened to me. So the real question I would pose, how does a child with 36 months of life experience
Yeah.
relate to all the possible things that could happen or have happened? They simply can't. So are we asking too much of them? But can we teach sympathy by showing them, hey, I would be sad if you did that, right? This could have this emotion. You're sad because your toy broke? well, so is your friend, right? Understanding that we can relate to others' emotions without them being an imposition on us, because we can't ask them to take on the responsibility for others' feelings when they don't have the cognition to hold the two opposing viewpoints.
Yeah. So when parents say like they have a really like sympathetic or empathetic kid, it's really them in present their impression on them, like from their own behavior, and they don't even realize it, perhaps.
Yeah, and but also, children do have tiny personalities, and some of them
Mm.
might be more observant than others, right? So that you might see a situation where that's just a case of an incredibly observant child, right? That is able to model that sooner than others might, right?
Oh, this one has an old soul.
I mean, we can get awfully esoteric about it, but
Yeah, no, but that's the things you hear, like, oh yeah, this kid's got an old soul.
that's for a different episode. So, I want to talk a little bit just as we continue here. My I love the titles of these chapters because I think they're gold. And so this one is "My Tantrums Are a Gift in Disguise."
Mm.
And parents are like, well, great, you can give me a lump of coal for Christmas, but I'm not, it's what are we wrapped up here? But no, I love this because once again, it comes from a place of really understanding what's happening when a child's having a tantrum. And it's a really important thing to understand because once again, not about manipulation, not about trying to force you into whatever scheme they've desired and you've foiled. No, it's simply an inability on their part to hold a viewpoint different from their own. And the child will teach you to demand what they want with all their might, right? And so it's a moment where they're saying the realization of not being able to change what is very hard for them. But our being there to help them navigate their upset is what empowers them to be transformed by that which they cannot change. And so understanding that someone telling you, no, you may not have a third cookie, may in that moment, in that very moment, to that child feel like the absolute end of the world. And it does, because life is so momentary.
Well, the whole part about not being able to hold like two different viewpoints is important to remember. It's just not cognitively possible for them to do that. So getting upset that they can't is the whole like impetus usually for any sort of like reprimands from it's there's a difference between the reprimand and some sort of guidance, I guess, to the
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. And I think one of the key points that she goes on to address in this chapter, right, is the emotions our children's tantrums stir up inside of us give us a glimpse into our own emotional maturity, but only if we're courageous enough to look.
Mm.
Right. So a lot of what happens in a moment of tantrum reflects far more on us than parents. Far more us on parents than them
And them, yeah.
as children. Yes. Right. And that's a huge piece of it. We have to really take stock of what our responses mean to them in the moment. So as they're struggling for connection, because the world is over. Someone said, you can't have another cookie, and that's it. Nothing else is worth living for. Right? It's a complete moment of disaster. And imagine that you've felt that. Like imagine the times as an adult or as a teenager that we have felt something like that. You were 12 and you failed a math test and that was it.
Mhm.
Life was done as you knew it, right? And if you had told someone that and they said, oh, get over it. It's not that big of a deal. Come on. Let me give you a reason to really be upset. How dismissive and awful would that have sounded?
Yeah.
Right? It's equally as true in that moment that the child needs you to understand, to be gentle, right? And to want to make connection as opposed to putting them at arm's length.
It's more amplified because of their lack of understanding. It makes it even more of an emotional jolt to them, I would say.
Yeah. And so, it's this idea that they're not out to get you, right? They're not out to ruin your day. They're not out to manipulate and twist you into to doing the next thing. And that is such a huge part of the realization, because you tend to really be more understanding. And that's this part of really being more understanding with them, but also with yourself.
Mhm.
Why does this make me so frustrated? Why does this make me so angry, right? Why am I so stressed out in this moment?
You might have just stumbled over, well, not stumbled, but touched upon the whole like the issue in general with parents is having their own issues that always reflect on their reactions. And that's looking deeper into yourself to even be a good parent. You need to first be okay with like your shortcomings and your bad tendencies first to even be able to try to react the right way. And that's probably harder for a lot of parents themselves or people who haven't been able to deal with their own stuff. And then now they have a whole other person's emotions to deal with, you know? That's something all of us, I'm sure, can relate to.
And also, not only a whole nother person's emotions to deal with, but a person who, in being a sponge, is now also a reflection of you.
Hmm.
I think there's no harsher gaze than the mirror,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? So, in an effort of introspection and in a moment of, self-evaluation, if you're not being terribly honest with yourself, this tiny unfiltered mirror who's reflecting all of the lessons you've taught consciously and unconsciously by the way that you behave and respond is going to show that and shine that right back on you.
Yep. That's a great way to put it.
And it could be rather harsh, and so I think that, there's a couple of other points that she makes briefly that I just really want to touch on, because I think they're two important things. One chapter is called Don't Disappear. And she ends it by just saying, always say goodbye. Once again, this whole idea of, it's so much easier for me in the morning if I just sneak out and she doesn't see me and she won't cry and she won't make a scene. Say that 3 times slow. It's so much easier for you.
Hmm.
And I think we have to move away from what is comfortable and easy and accessible and simple for us as parents, and towards what is best for them today, tomorrow, and 10 years from now.
Yeah. Amen to that. That's powerful.
Yeah, I think that's one of the large lessons I take from this book in general, right? And that it is as much about your child as it is about you, right? It is as much about the things that, and even the title. What young children need you to know. They need us to know these things and us to understand them, because frankly, they already understand it.
Yeah.
They understand, I need to be held. I need to feel safe. I need to feel wanted. I need to feel useful. I need to feel heard, right? Imagine the lack of agency that not even being able to fully verbally communicate your needs and your wants and your thoughts and your dreams is, right?
Hmm.
And so that all of these things have to do with our interactions, right? And our um, ability to hear and see and love and care for them, right?
Hmm. So it just keeps everything you're saying just makes me think about my own childhood and like the different things that I've struggled with throughout my life and how it probably goes back to, not saying my parents did a bad job, but just things that, were not understood or kind of ingrained into culture or whatever with the way you raise your kids and the way you answer them, you know, needs for, like in my part, probably just like trying to prove yourself all the time or be seen. Like what you said just struck me as something that maybe might have changed a lot of things as an adult that I've went through emotionally that I probably didn't have to if I would have had a better handle on those feelings as a child. And that's the kind of thing that, you're investing in for your child now for the rest of their lives. Think about it that way too. The whole, oh, that's the way it was done, or this is the way, like I was raised, or like that throws all that out the window. It's like you don't have to do the same thing.
Yeah. I think the famous, I turned out fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's define fine. Right?
Yeah.
Like let's look at it that way. And I really love that so she's got these daily parenting affirmations at the end of each chapter, and there are these single sentences, and one of the ones that comes right towards the end of the book I think is such a perfect summation of what you were saying. And she says, I recognize and appreciate the opportunity to continue my growth alongside my child.
There it is.
Yeah. It is beautifully simple. It is allowing so much space and gentleness for self, right? None of us has this down pat.
Yeah.
None of us has this 100% figured out. That's just not how anything in life works. But being able to be open to change, to growth, to maturity, to a deeper understanding of self as a parent, of each other as partners and co-parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of cycles of behavior, of cycles of trauma, right? Of cycles of all of these things that we are empowered to change, manipulate, break, and redo and reimagine is so important. And so I would say to each one of you, right, entering the parenthood game, surviving twos, celebrating threes, and all of the other milestones to come forward, do so with the knowledge that all of us are a work in progress.
Yes. Yeah. Get the pride and embarrassment out of it, and think about the welfare of this little person or people that you love even more than yourself. If that's not motivation, then I don't know what is,
Mm-hmm. And I love the final affirmation, and I'll read it because it's a great place to end the book, I think, and to end this discussion. And she says, I will never give up trying to become the parent my child needs or the person I want to become. Thank you, all of you, for joining us again for this episode and this beauty of a book. The link where you can purchase it will be available on our website, because if I could, I would send every parent in the world a copy. Like, this is me in books. I don't often keep them in my possession because I tend to give it to someone when I've heard they haven't read it. If you're looking to contact us further, as always, we are available at www.alltheunexpected.com. alltheunexpected.com. We are on YouTube as well. I'll give a short plug to our current documentary series that is online, exploring motherhood, race, and medicine. It's been a journey and a departure for the channel, and as a historian, such a passionate piece of work for me. We are also, as always, available on socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Find us out, send us an email. As always, love to hear from it. Wishing you all love and light and great compassion, strength of self, and love of self in this journey that is parenthood.